Hello, hello, hello. Good evening, good afternoon, and good morning. A very, very warm welcome to you all. It's really such a joy to see so many of you here with us today. Thank you for joining us for the global launch of AWID's new report, Where's the Money? An evidence-driven call to resource feminist organizing. My name is Kasia Staszewska. I'm connecting with you from Warsaw in Poland, and I work with AWID as the manager of the Resourcing Feminist Movements initiative. And also, I'll be your host for the webinar today. Today's session will be held in English, but we have closed captioning, international sign language interpretation, as well as AI interpretation into more than 60 languages through Wordly. Just to kick us off, I just really want to take a moment to acknowledge the heaviness of the times we're in. Across the world, feminist and social justice movements are facing violence, shrinking civic space, defunding, and the rise of authoritarian and fascist politics, while bearing witness to the complicity of so many of our governments in the ongoing genocide against Palestinian people. Many of us, as we speak, are navigating overlapping crises, be it economic, political, or climate, that make the question of how we sustain our movements, our organizing, even more urgent. And yet, in the midst of this all, feminist movements continue to do what they've always done: organize, resist, care, and build, mobilizing resources to the work that states and other institutions so often fail to do. So for the last 20 years, AWID has been documenting and challenges how resources flow and fail to flow to our movements. Since the very first time, Where's the Money survey in early 2000s, this work has been shaped by hundreds of feminist activists and researchers committed to transforming how power and how funding operates. So today we truly stand on the shoulders of feminists who built this work before us, and of those of you who have over the years picked up and adapted the Where's the Money methodology to your own contexts. So the report that we are launching today and the data behind it are grounded in the lived realities of nearly 1,200 feminists and women's rights organizations across 128 countries. This is the largest sample that AWID has collected to date. This work is really part of our feminist lineage and our contribution to the wealth of research and data that feminist movements, funders, and researchers continue to build together. So I just want to quickly walk us through what will happen over the next 80 minutes. And Juhi or Jamita, if you can maybe put a second slide for us with the event agenda, that would be greatly appreciated. Thank you so much. So we are going to kick off the webinar with a short video featuring feminist activists from different regions and from different movements, really grounding us in this conversation. Then I'm going to hand over to my wonderful colleague, our research expert and the main author of the report, Alejandra Moreno, who will walk us through the main findings. From there, we're going to move into a conversations with our partners and friends from Black Feminist Fund, from Equality Fund, Walk the Talk Consortiums, and ourselves here at AWID to reflect together on what resourcing sustainability means in this moment and what it will take to sustain and grow our feminist power into the future. This part will be facilitated by our dear and only Faye Macheke, who is a co-executive director of AWID. But before we get there, and before I forget in the heat of the moment, because this truly is, the launch of this report truly is a big day for our team, I also just really want to take a moment to thank those of you who have made this launch possible. First and foremost, I really want to thank feminist groups, organizations, and collectives who have responded to the Where's the Money survey. This is your data. Special thanks also to our research consultants at Voces, Constanza Argentieri and Natalia Di Bandi, who have been with us throughout the process and whose expertise in navigating incredibly rich and complex data was truly invaluable. Huge appreciation to our designer, Sofia Andreasa, who have worked late nights throughout the last week to bring the report and visuals to life. And FYI, the report is now ready to download from AWID website, www.awid.org/WITM. Thank you as well to our peer reviewers and to incredible AWID team working behind the scenes right now to make this launch accessible, and to everyone joining from different corners of the world. I can see that we already have over almost 300 people on that call. So thank you so much for giving us your time and just being with us in this moment. And on this kind of emotional, appreciative note, let's kick off. Let's hear from the activists themselves and watch the video. So if I can hand over to the AWID team to please put the video on, it's the time. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Sapphira. I'm a young feminist from Trinidad and Tobago and the founder of Korean Feminist, which is an intersectional gender justice advocacy platform that educates young people from the Caribbean and the diaspora about gender justice. And sustainable feminist movements for us are movements that are rooted in care, where the sustainability and well-being, mental health well-being and financial well-being of our advocates, of our volunteers and feminists are centered. It's also a movement that is well funded and resourced so that we have the resources, the human and capital resources, to ensure that our movements can be sustained over time. What does that look like in practice? It looks like intergenerational partnership. It looks like core, flexible, multi-year funding, especially for young feminist organizations like ours. It looks like investing in care economies and care ecosystems so that our feminists, as they're doing the work, are able to care for themselves and their families. So it can look like well-being spaces, it can look like health insurance to ensure that our movements are able to do the work to care for our communities in a sustainable way.
Hello everyone, my name is Savita Ali. I'm Managing Trustee of EVA Foundation. EVA Foundation is a feminist organization working to empower Dalit and minority girls and women through equality, dignity and leadership in Bihar. Our organization focuses on second layer leadership. Sustainability is not just about available fund and resources. For us, sustainability means keeping our dignity, value, vision, and solidarity alive, ensuring our work continues even as circumstances change. We sustain ourselves through collective leadership, a culture of care and love, and growth of new feminist ideas. Our vision is an ecosystem where every woman's voice is heard, every young woman lead, every decision is rooted in justice and equality. Sustainability is not destination, it is our everyday feminist commitment. Thank you so much. Jai Bhim.
Hola compañeros, soy Paz Romero de Argentina, cofundadora y directora de Justice Funds. Además trabajo en comunicación en una organización de acceso al aborto y otros proyectos locales. Sobre la sostenibilidad para una organización feminista, para mí tiene que ver con el trabajo y salir del loop eterno del trabajo no pago, que tiene siempre que ver, históricamente está vinculado a las mujeres y a la comunidad LGBT. Significa reconocer que ese trabajo es trabajo real, que sostiene comunidades enteras y que debería ser remunerado y valorado como tal. Muchas veces lo que hacen las organizaciones feministas son lo que deberían estar haciendo los estados: garantizar bienestar social, acompañar, alimentar y cuidar. Entonces la sostenibilidad también tiene que ver con que esas personas y colectivos tengan salarios dignos, condiciones laborales justas y seguridad para ejercer su activismo. Para mantener viva y sostenible una organización feminista ahora y en el futuro es esencial lo que acabo de decir, seguridad y financiamiento, pero financiamiento que sea justo a largo plazo y en términos definidos por las comunidades, por las mismas comunidades. Que los fondos entiendan el impacto y el riesgo desde las experiencias locales, no desde una mirada externa. También necesitamos entramados comunitarios más sólidos, donde las vecinas y vecinos se involucren activamente en el bienestar colectivo del barrio. Y sobre todo que el activismo deje de depender del voluntariado y del color político de turno de las organizaciones partidarias. Porque los feminismos desde siempre se han organizado y van a seguir organizándose porque son los primeros en poner el cuerpo a los problemas sociales del barrio y de sus comunidades. Gracias.
Hello everyone, this is Orchid. I go by the pronouns they, them, and I am from India, Kolkata, working with an organization named Shamo Bhavana, which is a trans-led collective where we work with trans and queer individuals at its core. For us, sustainability goes beyond financial stability. It is about continuing to nurture a collective that hold care, justice, and autonomy at its core. As a trans-led feminist organization, sustainability means creating a space where our community can breathe, heal, and lead, not just survive with oppressive system. It is about interdependence rather than dependency, strengthening network of solidarity and trans, queer, and feminist movements, and ensuring that knowledge, leadership, and resources are shared equally. Sustainability also means investing in community well-being, leadership transitions, and collective memory stories so that the work continues even when individuals changes their roles or the funding cycle ends. Our feminist sustainability is grounded at care work, emotional resilience, and collective decision making.
I'm Sarita Lamichane from Nepal, chairperson of Prayatna Nepal, which empower blind and visually impaired women to take their lives in own hand. For us, sustainability means not just funding. It is growth, independence, and long-term impact. We want to see our visually impaired women are economically empowered, digitally connected, and accepted in social life.
Mi nombre es Virginia Osana y soy oficial senior de programas en Women Enabled International. Y para mí, la sostenibilidad en nuestra labor feminista inclusiva de la discapacidad significa contar con financiamiento básico e institucional que sea flexible y a largo plazo para que nos permita responder de manera efectiva a las necesidades de las mujeres, las niñas y las personas de género diverso con discapacidad en los contextos complejos, dinámicos y diversos a los que nos enfrentamos día a día. Y aprovecho este momento también para agradecer a nuestras aliadas y a nuestros donantes por todo su apoyo en la defensa y la promoción de los derechos de nuestra comunidad. Y esperamos que más personas y más organizaciones se sumen. Y para cerrar me gustaría traer a colación las palabras de una colega del Líbano que dice lo siguiente: nosotras conocemos el terreno, conocemos el problema. Invertir en nuestro trabajo no es caridad ni una buena práctica opcional. Es imprescindible para avanzar efectivamente en la justicia y la dignidad de todas las personas, para defender la democracia y para abordar las persistentes violaciones de derechos humanos que impiden que las mujeres, las niñas y las personas con y sin discapacidad vivan vidas seguras, plenas y autodeterminadas. Muchas gracias.
Hello, my name is Farzana Adi and I am joining you from Afghanistan. I work with feminist networks for Afghanistan's women. For me, sustainability in feminist organization means being able to continue our work for justice, equality, and dignity. At the moment, the situation for women and girls is extremely difficult in Afghanistan. Therefore, the financial sustainability is vital for them. The feminist organizations need flexible long-term funding. Sustainability is not just about survival. It's about being able to dream, to plan, and to lead our own futures. To keep our organization alive, we focus on community, safety, and hope. Every act of connection, every story shared, every small success, these are the form of resistance and sustainability.
My name is Natumanya Bampa Peruth. I work with African Women Raising in Uganda. When I think about sustainability for a feminist organization, I think beyond just financial survival. I think about the ability to keep advancing the rights, dignity, and power of women, even when funding shifts or dries up. It means building strong community roots where the women we work with become the movement strength, leading, organizing, and sustaining the change we have started together. Sustainability also means diversifying how we resource our work, not depending on traditional donors, but tapping into local opportunities, the solidarity giving, the social enterprises, and the feminist funds that share our values. But above all, it's about staying grounded in our purpose. When our values and feminist principles guide our decisions, partnerships, and priorities, we can weather any storm amidst all these funding challenges. So sustainability is not only about keeping the doors open, it's about keeping the movement alive, relevant, and unapologetically feminist. Thank you.
Where is the money?
Hi everyone, this is Alejandra from AWID. Now it's my turn to share the key findings of this report, and I have to say I'm extremely happy to see so many people here today, and also very happy that this research is finally seeing the light after a lot of work. So before we go into the data, we're really curious to know what's your relationship with the survey? Have you completed it? Do you know the survey? So my colleague will pop a short, quick poll. It should appear on your screens in a minute. I hope it's there. Maybe you can give me a sign. Yes, I'm seeing it. So I'll give you a couple of seconds. It will be a quick one to see where we are and who is here with us today. And we know that some of you might not be eligible, but we're just really curious to see how many of the respondents are here with us today. So let's give it a couple more seconds and then we can see the results. And after that, I will walk you through some of the findings of our research. Okay, that is really interesting. We see that around 21% have completed it, so that's really a lot. We're very happy to have you here with us today, especially because this is really your data, as Kasia said. So thank you so much for being here with us and for having completed the survey last year. Awesome. So I can start with a couple of words, and we can go to the next slide, Gemotai, on what we're talking about here today. And Kasia already gave you a little bit of the overview. So basically, we're here with you today sharing research that is based on a methodology that we've been using since 2005 and refining it. And we're sharing the findings of the last survey conducted last year in 2024 from May to August. And the survey covers the period from 2021 to 2023, but we're also really, we put a lot of effort to try to analyze this in the current context that also Kasia pointed at too, that, you know, we've seen a lot of changes in the ecosystem since the survey was completed, so we're taking that into account. And very importantly, this is movement-centered data. This is your data once again, and many of the respondents are here with us, as we've seen. So this is really grounded in the lived financial realities of movements. And as has been mentioned, we get responses from nearly 1,200 feminist, women's rights, LGBTQI+ and allied organizations from 128 countries and predominantly from the global majority. So over 90% are based in the majority world, and this is something that we really welcome very much. So moving on to some of the key findings. I'm gonna share some data related to 3 aspects, and obviously you can look at the report for more information on all of this. But I'm gonna talk about how big are feminist budgets, who is resourcing feminist organizing, and also the quality of funding, and obviously trying to share some analysis around how to interpret and use the data. So let's start with that big picture, and let's start with the size of budgets. And our research really underscores a persistent gap between the funding and the realities of feminist movements. And our data shows that organizations in 2023 had a median annual budget of only 22,000 USD. And this points to a persistent budgetary glass ceiling that organizations are struggling to break through. And we're saying this because we have data from our previous survey conducted in 2010. And even though the samples are not the same, so we cannot fully compare, but we can draw some conclusions. We see that the annual budgets of organizations are not really growing. Rather, if we account for inflation, they're shrinking. And this is one of the first concerning findings of our research. But we also want to look closer. A median is a sort of aggregation, but we want to look closer at the actual budgets of organizations. And when we do so, when we look closer, we see that the funding landscape of feminist organizing is diverse and marked by inequality. We see that around 60% of organizations operate with budgets of less than 30,000 USD per year. We have on the lower spectrum around 14% that operate with zero budgets. In between, somewhere we have about 15% with budgets between 100,000 and 500,000 USD. And on the higher end of the spectrum, we have around 5% of organizations that operate with more than 1 million. And we see that the disparities are kind of going through along familiar lines. We see that groups that are in the majority world, that are unregistered, and those organizations that are led by or accountable to movements facing multiple types of oppression, such as women working in caste equity, or those working on harm reduction or resisting the war on drugs, they have the smaller budgets. So we see that the data really shows us how differently positioned we are within the feminist funding ecosystem. And this was also mentioned in the video. We are all in the same storm, perhaps, but we're not all exactly in the same boat because of these differences in our positionalities. So these gaps really reflect the deeper inequities and really call for intersectional responses to meet this moment. We didn't only want to look at the numbers and the size of the budgets. We really wanted to see how people felt about that and how they assessed their budgets. So we asked them whether their income was sufficient to do their job. And the response was overwhelmingly no. We have 83% of organizations that report that their income is insufficient to fully realize their strategic goals. We've also looked at aspirational budgets, so basically what they would like to have, and compared it to where we really are. And we can really, this data really helps us dispel, probably once again, the feminist organizations don't want to be small. Many or most really want to grow and they're ready to scale their impact, but the funding is not there. And we also know from other research and data that the feminist ecosystem can absorb much larger amounts of money. And obviously we know that things also have shifted since we conducted the survey. So there's a big gap between what could be and what is. One thing that is really, and we can move to the next slide. We know that the title of our survey, we use it in short, where is the money? And I think we all know where the money is, right? We know that there's more wealth than ever in the world. We know that billions are going into billionaires' pockets, into tax havens, into the war economy, into corporations that are destroying our climate and our nature. So we know that also that there's no shortage of funding for anti-rights agendas. So to understand the scale of feminist funding, we are looking at this data. You can look at more in the report, but I wanted to share one striking comparison here. and we have been inspired by the work of GPP to do this. We see that only 3 major anti-rights organizations in 2023 had combined over 500 million USD, which is twice as much as our total sample, which, as we have said a couple of times now, it's 1,200 organizations. So I think this really says a lot about how the money is flowing in the world right now. So now moving on to the second part of my presentation on the key findings, it's about who is resourcing feminist organizing. Something we really want to highlight is that feminist movements are resourcing themselves. At AWID, and of course, as many others, we've been talking about autonomous resourcing for many years. And also my colleague Gopika will talk about this later in the fireside conversation. But this is the first time that we're looking at autonomous resourcing in the survey, and we really believe this is really exciting and important. When we talk about autonomous resourcing, we're referring to resources, both financial and non-financial, that feminist groups are generating outside of institutional funding. And we know that this can include things like, and this also has been really made very clear in the videos from the activists, all these non-financial resources that sustain the movements and that are the backbone of the movements, solidarity, collective care, the political commitment, the passion, all of this is a part of the resources, the abundant resources that feminists have. And it also includes things like volunteering, membership fees, community support, so mutual aid. So all of this is part of this autonomous resourcing that we're talking about. And I think
sorry to stop you. This is the voice from the off, as requested. A little bit slower, please.
Wow, okay, great.
Thank you so much.
I was really trying.
I know you've been really trying, and it's going on great, but just a little bit slower. Thank you so much.
Yes, yeah, I gave a heads up that I'm a very fast talker, so I'm really trying my best for our poor interpreters to be able to keep up and for everyone to be able to follow. Also, I'm really excited about this data. So I was saying that autonomous resourcing is really the backbone of feminist organizing, but sometimes it's invisible, right? And I really love this quote that we have here on the slide from one of our members. It was shared in one of the AWID Solidarity spaces, that mutual aid is like oxygen, part of our ecosystem, but not visible. And if we move on to the next slide, we can see also that our numbers and our data really show this importance of autonomous resourcing. We see that 81% rely on some form of autonomous resourcing, that nearly 1/3 are using autonomous resourcing as the primary source to sustain their work, and that nearly half have reported that this has increased between 2021 to 2023. So this is really, again, emphasizing the importance of this. We believe this is a core part of feminist organizing and resourcing. And we also want to highlight that autonomous resourcing for many marginalized groups or groups facing oppression really isn't just a choice, but also a necessity, because they haven't been able to access capital, wealth, or income generating opportunities. And we know also that in the current moment, we can go back. In the current moment, we see that the importance of autonomous resourcing is being emphasized because of rising authoritarianism, because of the funding cuts. And we think this is important, but, and this is really critical, we want to highlight that just because feminists have the power to self-resource, they shouldn't be left completely to do it on their own. Autonomous resourcing shouldn't be used as a pretext to defund movements. At AWID, we really believe that we need both. We need autonomy, and we need this external funding and support. And we have the right to claim public and philanthropic funding because feminists are using it for public good. And we know that this work is important, and it really works. But okay, autonomous resourcing is one way through which feminist movements are resourcing themselves. If we look at the actual more like the financial resources, and now we can move to the next slide, we see that obviously a lot of organizations rely quite a bit on external funding. 70% have external funding, and this really makes up a quite large part of most of the organization's budgets, right? So this is really something to acknowledge. And we really ask, who are your funders then, right? And in this graph, you can see the list of possible potential like external funders. We see that women's and feminist funds are really on top by quite far away from like far ahead of the others. We see that around that 55% of women's and feminist funds, of organizations are receiving funding from women's and feminist funds. And what we have seen in this research, also as compared to our previous report from over a decade ago, is that these funds are really taking playing a really key role. And this is because they reach organizations across most of the budget sizes, from the smallest to the largest. They also really reach groups that are unregistered, which is rather the exception. And they reach organizations in all regions around the world, and especially or in all majority world regions. And something that is rather new as compared to the previous data is that also the size of the support from these funds is become larger over time. After women's and feminist funds, we see that we have INGOs and philanthropic foundations, which often, especially philanthropic foundations, make funding available to larger organizations. And on the bottom of the graph, we see the private sector, where only 10% of respondents are receiving this type of funding. And we know that this had been a big kind of promise or expectation in the past, and our data doesn't show that this has materialized. In the current moment of the funding, like from ODA in philanthropy, a lot of people are talking about the private sector. So we are sharing also some analysis in our report around that. What is obviously concerning is, for example, that in the current wave of the funding, also women's and feminist funds that are playing such a key role are also being impacted, and that this funding will be decreasing. And now moving on to the last point around the quality of funding. We really looked at what kind of grants, what kind of financial support feminist organizations are actually receiving. And we know that for many, many years, feminists have been calling for core, flexible, and multi-year or long-term funding. We've heard this in the videos. This has been a core demand from our movements. And our data actually shows that this has had a certain uptake. There's improvements in this area. And this is also correlated to the growth of women's and feminist funds that are actually leading in providing this type of funding, right? So I think this is something to highlight, and as a positive development, that core funding is more accessible than it used to be like over a decade ago. However, we know this is not the full picture, and that most of the funding is still quite precarious and project-based. And highlighting a few data points here, we see that nearly 3/4 have funding that lasts 18 months or less. That nearly half had been risk at closing, that nearly half didn't have savings to get through 2026. And just to highlight, this is data from 21-23. So we know that this has exacerbated. And another important point is around the fact that a lot of organizations have changed their priorities to align with funder agendas. And this really points to a critique and to what we've seen in the research, that many funders are kind of imposing agendas or themes that can lead to also silos within the movement, that they can restrict what people can do. And we've heard in the videos people saying, we know our context, we know what needs to be done, so please give us funding that allows us to do what we believe should be done. So there's a gap there between what we want and what is happening largely. And the data really shows, again, what works, what doesn't work. What works is core multi-year funding that is flexible, trust-based. It strengthens the movements and the short-term bureaucratic ones are just not. And we see that also so many organizations are really on the edge, and that's not sustainable. And we've heard a lot about sustainability in the videos, and we'll continue talking in the fireside conversation, right? So we believe that one key shift that needs to happen in funding approaches is to allow organizations to build our reserves and savings so that movements can have financial stability. And we really want to emphasize, and we can move to the next slide, is that reserves and savings are not extras. They're essential to the stability and sustainability of the feminist movements. And we really believe that it's time to see what's working and push for a new collective demand that is not just for long-term support, but also for funds that can be used strategically to build reserves, to buy land or property even, or invest in income-generating initiatives. So this is really a part of sustainability and for feminist movements to be able to thrive. And now, these are some of the key top-line data points and findings from our research. Of course, we invite you to look at the report or the executive summary. I want us to close, and we can move to the next slide. Just by saying why, a couple of things on why we think this data matters and why is it important. And I think the first point is that the data matters because knowledge is power, and it really gives us evidence to act. So in the past, we know that this type of data from the Where is the Money survey really helped mobilize millions for feminist organizing. And we also know that the context has shifted. So we're in a different context right now, but we know that the data still grounds us in reality and really pushes us to rethink how resources are shared, mobilized, and redistributed in intersectional ways. Secondly, the data really shows what's working and what's not working, as I mentioned. What's working, for example, is infrastructure offered by women's funds. And I pointed a couple of things throughout the presentation, and we're offering more on this in the report. And finally, obviously, we're not just producing this data just to launch a report. We really want to use this data for advocacy, for strategy, for organizing. And we really want to engage with you on it. We invite you to engage on it with us. And alongside the research, we're also providing a framework for strategic conversation and practical tools as well. Like the the Who Can Fund Me database that we launched in June, that maybe my colleagues will talk about, and that some of you might know. So really, this data tells us where we are, what works, and where are the cracks. And importantly, it really gives us a sort of starting points to imagine and build better funding futures that are feminist, intersectional, and just. That's it from me for now. I hope it was interesting, and I will pass it on back to my colleagues.
Thank you so much, Ale, for such an insightful presentation. There were a lot of comments in the chat asking us to share the presentation. I think we can absolutely do that. We can share the presentation after the webinar. But in the meantime, I'm also encouraging everyone to dive into the report that is already available from AWID website. All this data and more you will find in the report. We are getting close to a moment where we are, it's a mid moment of the webinar. So I will be soon handing over to Faye and our guest panelists. And on that note, I would like to officially move us to the second part of the webinar, a fireside chat about resourcing sustainability. So can I please call in on the camera Vanessa from Black Feminist Fund, Jess from Equality Fund, Bruna from Hivos, Gopika from AWID, and the host for the second part of that webinar, Faye, our co-executive director of AWID. So on that note, I'm just going to hand over to you. Have fun. And facilitator note, you're great with time. So fire away.
Thank you, Kasia. a lot of figures. And thank you to our speakers who have braved it on this launch, which we're really excited about. But also remembering that we're excited about the figures, but the moment is not exciting for all of us, and to keep that at the back of our minds. And I'm hoping that these speakers will bring some hope into this conversation. So we're going to pivot to the fireside conversation. And we want to talk about what it takes to make resourcing for feminist organizations sustainable in this moment of crisis and change, and into the future that we as a movement are collectively trying to shape. We know that resourcing sustainability has always been a key question for movements. And right now, as we face funding contractions, overlapping crises, and deep shifts in philanthropy, it's also a question of survival and imagination. And we heard from the activist about dignity and continuity and how we stay grounded in our purpose. Today, we want to explore how feminists are sustaining themselves and their movements, not only financially, as we heard from the data, but also collectively and politically. We want to immerse ourselves into the here and now. What is happening now? How do we move forward together? So we invite you into this conversation about sustainability, what it means to you, to your organizing, to the ways you move money, and how we grow our collective power, your allyship and activism today and into the future. That's a long grocery list, speakers, but I know that you are incredible, and you're each sitting in a different place in the ecosystem with your own powers, with your potentials and limitations. So you have about 6 to 7 minutes per question. And if you see me raise my hand, please finish your train of thought to conclude. And in feminist transparency, I will stop you if you keep on so that we can hear from others. So let's jump right into it. Vanessa, at a time when much of philanthropy is withdrawing, the Black Feminist Fund has gone the opposite direction. You recently announced that you would double your commitments through the Sustain Fund, moving even more resources to support your partners with more and longer-term funding. We would love to hear from you, Vanessa. How does a Black Feminist Fund approach resourcing sustainability for feminist organizing? And with just over 300 people joining us today, what would you like them to hear, to take away from this experience, especially now when we are really in the weeds? And so many funders are pulling back and movements need to keep growing. Over to you, Vanessa.
Thank you so much for this invitation, Faye, and the wider AWID team. It's really an honor to be here for the Where is the Money launch, particularly at this time you've highlighted the moment that we're in. I'm Vanessa Thomas, and I lead the philanthropic advocacy at the Black Feminist Fund. We are the first global institution of its kind, funding movements doing really powerful, transformative, world-building work that responds to multiple oppressions. To give some examples, we support election defenders, reproductive justice, LGBTQI rights, disability justice, girls' leadership, and those working to end gender-based violence, and so much more. We disrupt harmful philanthropic practices through advocacy that aims to really model, organize, and catalyze more and better resources to Black feminist movements. And through all of these interventions, we're really trying to change how Black feminist movements are resourced. And you touched on this, Faye, but to date, we have committed now over 50 million, which is a wild number to say, $50 million to Black feminist movements around the world. And what's particularly exciting about this for us, but also really damning for the sector that we're navigating and working in, so philanthropy, and the AWID report spotlights this. So $35 million of this was committed in 2025, so this year. And this is a year, as your question surfaces, where we have seen so much of philanthropy moving towards compliance with authoritarianism. We've seen fear-based reactions and capitulating to the opposition. So we're trying to model moving with foresight, not fear. And I think our commitments this year really demonstrate that we have, and we always will, flank and resource Black feminist movements like we want them to win. And that is what we're urging all our philanthropy colleagues on this call to do as well. So to get to your question specifically around the funding approaches, I think I can talk about this year as it's been such a busy time for us. So in April, we launched our flagship main kind of grants program for the second time. This is the Sustain Fund. This provides core and long-term flexible grants over 8 years. These grants are reviewed and selected by an advisory committee of Black feminists. So the Sustain Fund enables groups to have the kind of expansiveness, which was just highlighted in some of the research, to build and vision their work over time, as opposed to the really unrealistic and short-term project cycles, which we see are usually imposed by philanthropy. At the time of Sustain, so April, May-ish, we had anticipated making commitments totaling about $16 million. But by the closing date, we had received close to 2,000 applications from formidable Black feminist groups across the world. As our own Where is the Money research for Black feminist movements showed a few years ago, 0.1% of Black feminist movements receive philanthropic funding, and 81%, so the majority, do not have the funding to reach their goals. So the numbers have always been stark, and given this, the urgency of the moment that we're in now, and the power and the breadth and the depth of Black feminist movements globally, we made the call then to double this commitment. So we are funding an additional 54 Black feminist groups in countries ranging from Niger to Argentina and Sweden. Our movement partners are really doing groundbreaking and world-building work that brings justice to everyone. We're all sadly watching Hurricane Melissa wreak havoc across the Caribbean. And as politicians and corporations bat around really piecemeal and ineffective responses to a climate disaster, which we know is caused by billionaires and imperial hegemony, our movement partners in that region, they are doing world-building work. They are responding to these disasters and working on climate solutions that build long-term resilience to these now really frequent episodes. In addition to Sustain, we have a smaller solidarity fund, and this is focused on resourcing kind of solidarity efforts, for example, for convenings, campaigns, exchanges, etc. So we are doing the damn thing, if I do say so myself, but we cannot and we will not win the social justice that the world really needs to if we go alone. This has been highlighted so much in this call, and I think it's really important to emphasize again. But authoritarian regimes and far-right movements are creating environments of chaos, fear, and division, all while directing, like has been showcased earlier, resources and power away from the movements who are on the side of justice, towards instead more militarization, more wealth hoarding, and more repression and inequity. So I'll round this up and direct my close to the philanthropy colleagues on this call. This moment doesn't call for retrenchment. This moment doesn't call for fear-based decisions that are protecting institutions over people. And it certainly doesn't call for abandoning solidarity and the Black or queer or disabled or Indigenous or all these in between, if you can imagine it, communities at the sharpest ends of all of this. This moment calls for intentionality. It calls for an all-out offense with all of our players who believe in a just, free, and affirming world to really be bold and to think expansively. I think at the Black Feminist Fund, we have shown that it is both possible but also legal to fund in the ways finance departments have said this year is risky. Feminist funds cannot carry this philanthropic work alone, and I'm so unsurprised to see that in your data earlier. This year, we have really seen big foundations backpedaling and defunding organizations working on racial and gender justice. And as anti-rights regimes have doubled down, so too must our collective pushback. And just to close, at the Black Feminist Fund, we have modeled that pushback this year, and we're really imploring others in philanthropy to meet the movements with the same kind of courage and intentionality. Thanks, Faye.
Right on time, and it's incredible. I mean, when the others are stomping death to DEI in this moment, to be having an additional 50 million, that's amazing. And you are doing the damn thing. So well done to Black Feminist Fund. And there's a call. I cannot top anything that you've said there. There is a call, a clear call to philanthropy to move forward together. And that Black Feminist Fund is saying we can't do it alone. So join us. And talking of doing the damn thing, I'll move on to our very own Gopika. And let's talk about autonomous resourcing. We keep hearing this term more and more, and it's definitely gaining traction, especially in this moment. AWID's own research shows that a significant proportion of feminist groups rely on autonomous resourcing. And I think we had the figures of 81 and 21% and 29%, and that this reliance has only grown over time. Can you unpack this for us? What is autonomous resourcing, just from a layperson point of view, and what isn't it? And could autonomous resourcing be part of the solution to the multiple crises and waves of defunding we are seeing? Or is just that too simple a take? Over to you, Gopika.
Thanks, Faye. I love being asked questions about, is that too simple? Because as feminists, everything is complicated for us, right? So lovely to be here today and speak alongside all of these incredible feminists. I'm Gopika, I'm the Director of Programs at AWID, and I'm based in India. So this is a very interesting question, one that's interesting to AWID and also to myself personally as somebody who's watched a lot of AWID's journey around autonomous resourcing, our conceptualization from outside, and then on the inside after I joined AWID. So I want to thank you for asking this question. Of course, we put it in there because we're hosting the webinar, but as AWID, we're hearing the term alternative resourcing quite a lot in the current ecosystem. And I think especially amongst funders who are at the front lines of experiencing the defunding, the freezes, the rollback of funding for human rights and feminist movements. So I want to actually start with this term, alternative resourcing. And the importance of this framing lies in what is this resourcing alternative to? And is it just an alternative to the current philanthropic and donor ecosystem? Because this term is sort of gaining credence in a way which seems like it's a way to spell out alternatives to the mess that has been created by, problem like organized philanthropy, which has in many ways, as Vanessa has pointed out, been problematic in the current moment. So this is quite different from what we refer to as autonomous resourcing. And I think today, in the few minutes that I have, I want to talk about why that conceptual clarity is important for us, both as movements as well as for funders who are also thinking about, oh, what do we do at this moment? Like, how do we figure out what's the best way to make use of the limited resources that we have? The numbers and the data are very compelling. And probably one of the reasons why you'd see like AWID's work on autonomous resourcing has not showed up in sort of the philanthropic advocacy work that we do is because of the importance of conceptual clarity and why it's important that that in many instances, sometimes these terms get co-opted and misinterpreted within the ecosystem. So as Ale said, autonomous resourcing is often a political choice, but for many it's about survival. It's a transformative way in which movements are mobilizing many kinds of resources. And even within AWID, if you think about how we're talking about the conceptual clarity, we talk about autonomous resourcing. We also talk about economic justice. We talk about resourcing justice. And so there's no denying that sort of the talking about resourcing and economic justice together, it brings out tensions of talking about funding in the context of a world which is colonial, patriarchal, capitalist, Brahminical, white supremacist. We can go on about the systems and structures that exist. And these systems and structures have existed historically and in the present. But I think what is clear is that all of these systems and structures have created a dependency on the institutions we are trying to hold accountable and in many instances raise money from. So we have to hold some of these tensions in ways that speak to each other. So we have to check ourselves when it comes to co-option. So why would we talk about building feminist futures or building feminist economic alternatives and then play within the boundaries of the sort of multilateral and corporate infrastructures that much of institutional funding rests on? So I would say even within AWID, we have a lot of discussion around how we should not confuse what we talk about when we say autonomous resourcing or alternative resourcing, and the importance of resourcing feminist economic alternatives, which are about creating a macroeconomic structure that does not depend on the institutions that we critique. And that's going to take time. The last couple of things I will talk about with our audience is our audience is diverse. We have activists, we have funders, and from the different parts of the ecosystem. So we want to be able to appreciate the importance of autonomous resourcing in the ecosystem of resourcing, but also in the movement ecosystem, right? We don't want to hold it up as a sort of magical way to ensure the sustainability of feminist movements. But at the same time, we need to ensure that it doesn't take away from our demands as feminists around reparations, around justice, and why this money is essentially important not to give away just because, or cede ground to. And Vanessa, I think you really pointed how the Black Feminist Fund has done that. Faye, do I have like how much longer do I? 2 minutes? Fantastic. So my last couple of points will be for folks who are movements and funders. So for movements, this is not rocket science. I'm sure me explaining autonomous resourcing to you is like, telling you what you already know. So you have and will continue to mobilize resources because that is one of the core foundations of movement building. Some may have more choices than others, the privilege of being able to choose where your funding comes from, and some are not able to do that. I just would implore that in this moment, let's not cede to the pressure of trying to figure out, how do I raise money? How do I sell this soap? Or how do I make a product and fall into that same capitalist trap, And it is happening. It is happening, and that's not our fault because we are trying to sustain our work. So let's not try and cede ground and tell donors to help us experiment with some small thing which will be like very reminiscent of the startup ecosystem, for example. So let's not do that. For funders, the last minute is we need to continue core flexible funding to the groups for whom philanthropy was always out of reach, who have always had to rely on autonomous resourcing in a way that has prevented them from pursuing the systemic change they wish to create. And it's usually the most marginalized. If you're interested in funding feminists who are pioneering autonomy, it is really important not to create levels of autonomy or innovation or scale as conditionalities. We can't talk about supporting autonomous resourcing as some new innovation. So that's just a check to funders. And the last one is, if we really want to push movements to be autonomous, my last one is, let's support them with practical things like risk management, infrastructure support, and all of the sort of tangible things which often groups are not able to do in an autonomous way. So I'll end with that as a proposition for funders and for movements. And I hope to learn more from the other speakers and engage with everyone here. I think some of our colleagues have put in some of our resources in the chat as well. So thank you, Faye.
Thank you, Gopika. Please go and read our report, because what the speakers are saying right now already speaks to some of the data that we have found. And we have heard about the scarcity of resources in the here and now. And thank you, Gopika, for the really practical suggestions that you've given. We should not cede ground, and at the same time, we are still hammering on about core, long-term, and flexible funding. I think we've heard it from all the speakers, and it's not a side issue. It is the main issue that we want to talk about from the data. So over to you, Jess, as we speak about scarcity and about just not having enough. We started off on the 0.1%, right? And then we went to the 22,000 in terms of median. So we are talking about no resourcing, and Equality Fund is coming at a time when both aid and philanthropy is shrinking even more. And you have decided to do something different. The Equality Fund's gender lens investing model offers a different way of thinking about sustainability. Could you share a little bit more about how the Equality Fund approaches resourcing sustainability, and what this model makes possible that traditional grant making often can't? And it's a long question. Looking ahead, what lessons or provocations would you offer to others, both funders and movements who are thinking about new ways to sustain feminist organizing into the future?
Just that little question. Hey, Faye?
Just a small question.
Thank you so much for the question. And it's really nice to be here and to listen to my colleagues and to hear this report, which could not be coming at a better time. It's a great question. I'll back it up a little bit if I can. The Equality Fund was built just over 5 years ago, and very much on the heels of a conversation and a consultation that AWID partnered with us on, which was really trying to co-create what a fund could look like that was deeply in service of movements and fundamentally accountable to movements. Because we had an opportunity with a very narrow political window where the Canadian government made a choice to invest a significant one-time sum into feminist movements globally. And that was a big win for our movements. But the idea of co-creating it and co-designing the Equality Fund is something that AWID stepped in to help us do. And they were able to activate your network and speak to thousands of feminist leaders, economists, and investors to help really design what the Equality Fund could be. And it was then designed with that intention and with that emphasis for core, flexible, multi-year, predictable funding, for movement-led decision-making, for a board and a governance structure that was led and directed by feminist movements, and that would move abundant resources into our movements, not just right now, but for decades, perpetuity potentially, because we knew we needed something that was going to be able to stand the test of time. And we were trying to create something that was not going to be vulnerable to the whims of philanthropy or the trends in political funding cycles. And so fundamentally, we were trying to create our own wealth for our movements. And we have been at this experiment for 5 years. I think when we built the Equality Fund 5 years ago, we knew that we wanted something that would be invulnerable to shocks. I would say I don't think any of us had any idea how quickly it would be needed or how dire the situation would be 5 years into it. As a fund that relies on Canadian government and other government resources to see $60 billion move out of the USAID infrastructure this year alone, and to see the global cutbacks, in particular in the philanthropic and the bilateral government space, UK, Canada, many other countries in Europe who are pulling back from this effort. We're seeing a huge decline in US philanthropy because of what my colleagues have spoken to around the fear of funding brave work. Because in particular in the US, we know that the leaders and these institutions are in front of Republican congressional hearings and trying to defend their endowments. And so it is a really scary time. So to have created something that's still very much a work in progress, we at the Equality Fund like to joke that we are building the plane while we fly it, except for the governments who fund us. We're like, can you please not say that? that makes us very, very nervous when you talk like that. But that's really the essence. And what I would say is the reason that we have done it this way is because we actually wanted to dance with the how do you sustain your wealth and how do you build your wealth within traditional sort of investment mechanisms. we consider ourselves radical reformers. So we're going to work within the system because the system is the one that we have right now while we try to really break that down. And the reason for that is because there's 600 billion globally moving in philanthropic capital around the world. There's 250 billion moving in bilateral overseas development assistance around the world. And there's 275 trillion moving in capital markets. And so that feels like a resource that we as feminists can be leveraging and activating, knowing it causes tremendous harm in so many cases. But what if we were the decision makers around those resources? And what if we could build something different in order to see what's possible within that $275 billion marketplace? And so the Equality Fund was launched with a $300 million contribution from the Government of Canada, alongside other philanthropic partners, as well as other governments. And in the last 5 years, as we have built the plane and flown it at the same time, I'm very proud to say that we've moved $100 million out the door to feminist movements, most proximate to the solutions in 100 countries, to about 15 to 1,800 groups. And these are a wide range of groups, Indigenous, Black and Afro-descendant groups, migrant workers, sex workers, rural women, women living with disabilities, domestic workers, the list goes on. But how we raise and how we invest our money is perhaps the thing that's most interesting, I think, for this conversation. I would say none of us were investors coming in. This is very much a field we've had to learn. We have had a lot of discomfort that we have had to sit within. But I'm very proud of the Equality Fund team and our entirely global investment committee of feminist economists and investors who are helping us do this thinking, who have built our gender lens investment portfolio, who have built our intersectional feminist guidelines that guide our decision-making. And what I have learned is that actually it is a really great way to influence the field. I love this, Vanessa, that we're doing the damn thing, even though sometimes we want to do it through our through our fingers. The gender lens investment criteria looks at a lot of different types of things. It looks at the extent to which businesses prioritize equity, rights, and power. It looks at the extent to which businesses prioritize economic, social justice. Faye, do you need me to slow down?
You can round off your train of thought. Thank you.
Thank you. And it also looks at the extent to which businesses prioritize environmental health. And what it looks like on the ground is, for example, automated and digital financial services for specifically targeting women in Jordan, or it might look like inflatable incubator technology that's being used in Haiti and Gaza as we speak. And so I would say this continues to be an experiment for us. I would say that what we're learning is that we are outperforming traditional markets. And because of the size and the scale of what we're trying to do, I think we're uniquely able to influence certain tables who have not been looking at their investments through a feminist lens up to now. So, I appreciate that it's really complex, and we have had a lot of conversations inside and around the Equality Fund about how to use this money well and how to activate the entire continuum of capital at our disposal in service of our work and to drive power of feminist movements and accelerate that change over time. And I'd say that we are still learning as we go. Thanks, Faye.
Thank you, Jess. So much packed into a few minutes, but 300 million also speaks to the longevity of the vision of what we can do. I always say we don't have a scarcity problem. We've got a distribution problem. We don't have a money problem. And we've got a reprioritization problem because the money that we have is being reprioritized elsewhere. And somehow you have found a way to channel it back. So let's see what the new kids on the block are doing. Both Black Feminist Fund and Equality Fund are really new kids on the block, and it's exciting what we can do when we put our minds to it. So let's land the conversation with you, Bruna, and I'm turning to you now. because you've recently convened 200 feminists to talk about resourcing feminist futures. Can you share some of the key takeaways from that conversation with us? And now you know it's a long question. It's in this time of general uncertainty, when we're all trying to make sense of what's happening and what's next for resourcing movements, what directions or insights emerged collectively from this convening, and how does the road ahead look from where you stand? Thanks, Bruna.
Thank you, Faye, and thank you, everybody. Hello. It is a truly pleasure to be here. This is, of course, a big question, but we are very happy to have convened the Financing for Feminist Futures Conference just a couple of weeks ago in Madrid, and grateful for the opportunity to share some of these outcomes that have emerged collectively. As you mentioned, we had 200 people. We had the pleasure and the privilege of having 200 people sharing, giving up the times of their personal lives to be together with us, from feminist movements, from civil society organizations, researchers, also allies in donor governments, in philanthropy, and we all had to ask that we take off our hats and really try to think as collectively what is needed as an ecosystem, as a response to the critical times that we're living. So I'll do my best to try and transpire what has emerged there. But first of all, just wanted to thank AWID for hosting this critical space, and congratulations on the launch of the report. For those who don't know me, my name is Bruna Martínez. I am Brazilian, based in the Netherlands, and I serve as the program manager of Walking the Talk, a consortium of 5 European-based organizations advocating for more and better resources for gender equality and feminist movements in the Global South. Since the consortium's inception 2 years ago, we have been building on the incredible work of feminist movements and women's rights organizations around the globe. Our efforts focus on influencing donor governments, particularly the Netherlands, the UK, Germany, France, and the EU context, nationally, multilaterally, and within private philanthropy as well, through knowledge generation, research, and mobilizing diverse partners and allies around the financing for development process and beyond. It is no secret to anyone that since the beginning of the consortium 2 years ago as well, the political context has dramatically shifted across our national markets, but also globally. So we have had to adapt, and as all of our partners think quickly how we can be of service to the movements, the ecosystem that we serve, which was one of the ideas behind convening the Financing for Feminist Futures Conference. And I just want to give a quick shout out, first of all, to everybody who were there. I saw so many of you in the chat, but to the amazing Shita Chandri and Bhavna, who were the architects behind our convening. Just wanted to give that shout out. But in terms of the work that we've been doing that led to the conference, earlier this year we launched the 12 calls to action for resourcing gender equality, which is an advocacy framework co-created with many of you to bring together the collective priorities of feminist movements worldwide, and that was used to influence a lot of the discussions around financing for development. Our first big ask was bold: 20% of ODA should go to gender equality. In 2024, that felt ambitious but attainable. Given the current political climate, it really feels like a much tougher ask in 2025, but we continue to use it even as an aspirational benchmark to push the governments in the so-called global north. We have also supported 13 feminist research projects to produce the architecture of change, feminist pathways to financing gender equality, a compendium of papers exploring the future of feminist resourcing with over 40 researchers from the Global South, with recommendations to bilateral governments, international organizations, and philanthropy. I invite you all to read it and to echo Alejandro's point that data is power and sustaining feminist research is critical, which was a choice for us investing in this work as well. But through the work, then we led to our convening, which happened earlier this month, and we all know that we all reached Madrid knowing the challenges that we all have highlighted that we're currently facing. But what happened is that we left with a re-energizing and hopeful feeling. The conference really reminded us that feminist movements remain resilient, strategic, and ready to respond. And really a critical message that hope and joy in this moment is not option, it is compulsory. In the vein of collective power, one of the stronger messages that the conference also brought forward was the need for a big tent approach to unite across movements, sectors, and geographies, and to rally around key battles, protecting core funding, advancing care, justice, and influencing global economic policies. We saw that we are up to the task and that there were clear examples of where feminist mobilization has influenced governments to respond to civil society pressure. And we also recognize the critical role of women's organizations in transforming social norms. These groups are both actors standing up against anti-democratic forces and achieving progress, even where civil liberties are under threat. As the political tide shifting in Europe, there was also a call from movements to move away from the very colonial framing of this is unprecedented times, when we know that feminist movements and organizations in the South have endured the crisis that is now hitting Europe and other movements in the North. And this is a moment for civil society in donor countries to learn from the experiences of feminist movements across the world. And now, of course, shout out to Latin America, my region. There's a lot of the movements can contribute to fighting these authoritarian forces. And within that.
Thank you, Bruna. Can I allow you to just wrap up your last thought? We are a little over time.
Oh, okay.
Thank you.
Yeah, for the conference just highlighted that. I think what I would just leave, and we have some recommendations, but I think what I wanted to leave is that, quoting what some folks have said here, is that we need to sit with the discomfort of the moment it is a completely different momentum where we are in terms of the funding landscape, and where we have sometimes had hold, of course, our headlines in terms of assessing other types of funding. Now is the moment not to be divisive. And if others want to sit and have conversations with private sector, with others that we have otherwise had more of apprehensive in connecting to those, this is the moment that, each one of us have their different strengths and levels of comfort to assessing that, and to talk to non-traditional funders as well, besides the ones that have been championing gender equality.
Thank you so much, Bruna, and thank you to all our speakers. The one thing I love about these conversations is that it's as if you prepared together. Actually, you're only seeing each other now. We didn't even prep, but the data is there. So let's wrap up the conversation. And just to say that the moment calls not only for reflection, but for action and collaboration across movements. This report is a tool for movements, funders, and allies to act, imagine, and organize together. Over the next months, we'll announce a series of conversations for movement-wide reflection and action. So the conversation's not over. Please join us in our AWID community. If you're not a member, become a member so we can carry this conversation. I am sorry I was a bit strict, but I also want to respect your time and your absolute passion to be here, and your space as well. So I want to just highlight that we are continuing these conversations for movement-wide reflection and action at the Commission Status for Women, at Women Deliver, and virtually in 2026 to help us connect dots and arrive at shared strategies. AWID's role is to connect dots between feminist movements, funders, and broader struggles for justice, and between different initiatives to reimagine resourcing. For us, it means deepening our work, and we want to start naming more explicitly and politically resourcing justice as part of economic justice. If you're not an AWID member, please join us. That's how we stay connected, share tools, and mobilize as a movement. I also saw that someone was asking about where to get funding from the team. If you can drop our Who Can Fund Me database link on here, if you're looking for funders, or if you are a funder, please join our Who Can Fund Me database. But thank you again to our speakers, and I will hand over to you, Kasia.
Thank you so much, Faye. And Alejandra, Vanessa, Gopika, Jess, and Bruna, thank you so much for such a rich and honest conversation. And Faye, thank you for guiding us so beautifully. I don't know why it is like this, that there's always and more to be said, and we need more time. That's just the hard reality we need to reckon with, but it is what it is. We have tried our best to respond to the questions in the chat. Those questions that have not been responded, please be reassured that we're holding to them, and we'll be launching a follow-up conversation to today's webinar on the AWID community. We have there what we call Resource Mobilization Hub, and this is where the conversations continue and responses are going to be shared. Before I officially close us off for today, I just want to make sure that that you have everything you need to explore the resources we launched today. You can download our new report, Where's the Money? An Evidence-Driven Call to Resource Feminist Organizing, along with data snapshots that serve as an executive summary from the AWID website. For now, they're only available in English, but please stay tuned. English and French versions are coming up soon. They will be ready by the end of the year. And in the meantime, we invite you to explore the rich infographics talking about the state of funding, quality of funding, and autonomous resources that are available in English, Spanish, and French. As Faye said, we have Who Can Fund Me database, the resource that we've launched in June, which is a practical tool for feminist organizations searching for potential funders. And we also have a fundraising guide developed by our dear member, Paz Romero from Justice Funds, Getting the Money We Need, a one-on-one guide for fundraising for small grassroots organizations in English, Spanish, and French that you can access from AWID website. In the meantime, as we said, conversation doesn't end here. Watch for more announcements. Please stay connected for AWID Space, and on behalf of everyone at AWID, thank you once again for spending this time with us and for all that you do to sustain feminist organizing around the world. With gratitude and solidarity, until next time.
تنزويتنا بالرؤيتنا